Father God, you know my every thought, and you know my ways, the path on which I walk, and you know me better than I know myself, and you've known me longer than anyone else. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, and I can't even understand it. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. I can't even comprehend it, but I know you see. Oh, this I know you see. Oh, I could walk where men may never tread, or plunge the depths where I could make my bed, but I never went hide and seek. You're so good at finding me, only lost in the mystery of the depth of your love for me. Just knowledge is too wonderful for me, and I can't even understand it. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. Oh, and I can't even comprehend it, but I know you see. Oh, this I know you see. And even where my world is shaking, Lord, your hand will hold me still. Even where my world is shaking, your hand will hold me still. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
Hi everyone, welcome to Church Online again for another edition. Great that you can join us. We're really glad you've come along, even if you just stop in for a little while, check us out, be part of the action. I ask you to have a look at the notes tab just down below the screen there. There's a little notes tab. If you click on that, that'll give you some of the notices for the week and some other information. There's also Merawyn will be preaching today, and her notes are in there for notes on the sermon. Enjoy your time with us. We've got a few things planned there for you today. Please hang around after the service. As soon as the video finishes, there's 45 minutes of chat, and I'd encourage you to engage in the chat there, not just about, hi, I got my jammies on, things like that, but and that's fine, but I really encourage you just to engage with the message. And so as Merawyn preaches today, you might want to take some of your own notes of things that might spark some conversation within you and from you. And let's have a time after the service there, where we can engage with the word. Great to have you along, as I said, and stay tuned. We hope to increase our online presence. We're getting to that stage now. We're wondering, how much longer do we go on doing this? But I think there's a great value in what we're doing now. So we actually continue. We plan to continue to do some kind of increased online presence because, well, that's the new normal and the new world that we're living in. God bless you and your time with us today.
Good morning. It's Friday morning and Leanne Keough here, your on-the-spot reporter, to give you the latest on what's happening at the church. Because, of course, there is always stuff happening at the church. So here you go. We have now got some fence posts in at the back here. It's going to look a lot different when you come back one day, when church happens again, because this back area is now going to be enclosed. So just to run you through the new entrance we are about to walk through. I'm walking through the entrance now of how you get into the church. Wasn't that exciting? Okay, now we're coming around the other part of the church as well, because this is really, really exciting. The paving is finished, it's completely finished. There's nothing left to do on it now. Oh, except Wes to take his pallets, which I'm sure he'll do very soon because I'll hassle him about it. So if we look around the corner here, look at that. Isn't that amazing? But it's not just paving down here, it's the drainage done properly. So we're no longer going to have any issues with our drainage here, and it's going to help with the cracks at the church as well. Let's have a look. And as the landscaper said, he reckons just with the paving and the garden already looks better. It's so great to have this done. It really is. We've just come around here and there's been some more drainage stuff done at the front here. Because our pipes were just going to go into lead the water into the foundation, so now that won't happen. So that's it for now. That's probably enough, isn't it? Until next time, because you know me, there'll always be something happening down here. All right, signing off. Leanne signing off from the church.
Howdy kids, I've got a very quick talk for you about faith. I want to read to you a verse from the Bible. This is in Hebrews chapter 11 and it's verse 6. And it says, "And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." Now, I've got a couple of balloons with me today. And I've got this very sharp skewer. Now, what happens when I push the skewer into the balloon? What do you think is going to happen? Probably think it's going to burst, right? But what if you have faith that it's not going to burst? I don't really have the faith that this is not going to burst. So let's see what happens. Boy, that was loud. Okay. I have another balloon, but on this balloon, I've stuck some sticky tape down. Now, I think this one's not going to pop. Let's see. Go through the middle here. Let's work through the tape. Oops. There we go. So you can see that it goes into the balloon now, and the balloon hasn't popped. Now, you see what happens is when we try to please God, when we try to do all the right things and live a good life, we're like that first balloon that just went pop. But when we put our faith in God, God can do the impossible and stop us from popping. So have faith in God, and he will do things in your life that you might think are impossible. Just put this through here. Let's see, there we go. Oh! Hopefully. Bah!
This morning's reading comes from Luke chapter 24, the last chapter, starting at verse 13. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" And they stood still, looking sad. And one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?" "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who went with us to the tomb, some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." And then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened. They recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 disciples and their companions gathered together. They were saying, that's the ones in Jerusalem, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." And then the two said what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. And while they were talking about all this, Jesus himself stood among them and said, "Peace be to you." So how's your peace going with the isolation? I've had weeks of frenzied activity and other weeks of wanting to be still and review my priorities. I want to use my time creatively, but it takes a while to adjust. With all the information and misinformation that's crowding the TV and social media, I've never before felt such rapport with those disciples on the road to Emmaus. I felt at times overwhelmed and wanting to see how God can use our current event to teach me what I most need to know, what I couldn't see without a total change in the status quo. And I see these disciples on the day of Jesus' resurrection. They know the Old Testament stories, they know the prophecies, but they mostly wanted a political and an economic solution to something that was really awful. Surely God would send a conquering Messiah, like it said also in the Old Testament scriptures. What they were expecting and wanting at that time was the second coming, what we know as the second coming. I feel for those disciples. They were talking together, they were trying to join the dots. Their world had come crashing down. Their closest friend had tragically died. Another friend had hanged himself. They felt betrayed by the one person they most trusted in the world. All their dreams for the future were shattered. Any one of these things is capable of bringing a person to spiritual despair. But the compounding factors just kept building up. The disciples reasoned. Jesus was obviously the awaited Messiah and sent by God. How else could he have spoken with such insight? So many miracles, and the power of God was so much in him. He challenged the leaders of our nation, and he walked with us. He accepted us. He understood us. He met us in our pain. Even though he did say some pretty strange things in those last days, walking to Jerusalem recently. And now more confusing? Some women of our group have said that they went to the tomb and they saw visions of angels and promised that the Lord had risen from the dead. The disciples were too overwhelmed by grief and loss to imagine new possibilities, new hope. In the book of Ezekiel, the question is, can these bones live? Now, the book of Luke, the way he's sharing this particular story, he's kind of asking the same thing. And it depends a bit on what scholar you read as to when the book of Luke was written. It could have been as early as AD 63 or sometime after AD 70. In AD 63, the society was a cauldron of unrest. Society was just trying to find all sorts of ways of getting rid of the Romans. And of course, in AD 70, they completely destroyed Jerusalem. They completely disappeared the temple, carried off all its treasures to Rome. Either way, the question remained, can these bones live? Well, we have the benefit of 2,000 years to understand and process the words that Jesus spoke. So why did he start with prophecy and scripture? Well, that was their foundation. The disciples needed to see that what they thought was not actually true. The foundation of their faith was still secure. They just needed a different pair of glasses. What they were experiencing was still God's plan of deliverance for them. They had not lost their way. They had not been cast adrift. They were not without direction. Their closest friend was not only alive, but truly risen from the dead. The women were correct. They had not been betrayed, but they were now going to be empowered in a way that they had never imagined possible. Their dreams for the future were not shattered, but just powerfully different. And what does Jesus do? Well, he starts where they are. He asks them to spell out their concerns, just like he asks us to clarify the tumult of our hearts, to try and put it into words, to pray it out. Jesus walks with them and reveals understanding to them, even though they're not aware that it's Jesus that's walking with them. And that also is our experience. I just love the words of the Waymaker song. Even though we don't see it, he's working. Even though we don't feel it, he's working. He never stops. He never stops working. From Genesis to Revelation, we need to interpret what we read in the light of Jesus. We're called Christians because Jesus the Christ gives meaning to our lives and the power to make good decisions. Life does not always make sense. Sometimes it does when we look back on it. But we are promised that God wants to bring good out of these situations. And there are times when we just must trust God and obey. Even though what's being experienced seems beyond endurance, certainly beyond understanding. I hang on to Romans 8:37. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And I trust God will reveal his goodness and healing. God accepts us because of what Christ has done in our place. And may his love, which he's sure be sustaining for you during this time. Well, I found a fairy story that has parallels to this story of the journey, the walk to Emmaus. And it certainly has parallels with some of our experiences at the moment. So let me tell you a fairy story. Once upon a time. All good fairy stories start with once upon a time. And thanks to William J. Borsch for the idea. So once upon a time, some grandparents were in a little shop looking for a gift for their granddaughter. Suddenly the grandmother sees a teacup. Says, "Oh, Harry, look at this. It's just the thing. It is gorgeous." And Granddad looks at it and says, "My, that is one of the loveliest teacups I have ever seen. It's perfect. We'll have to get it." And just then, to their surprise, the teacup says, "It wasn't always so lovely. It wasn't always beautiful." Well, needless to say, the grandparents are somewhat surprised. And they say, "What do you mean you weren't always so beautiful?" And the teacup says, "Well, I was once just an ugly, wet ball of clay. And then a man with wet, dirty hands picked me up and spun me round and round and round and round and round. And I just said, 'Stop, stop, stop, I'm getting dizzy.' And he said, 'Not yet.' And then he punched me and prodded me and poked me. And I said, 'Ouch, ouch, stop, stop.' And he said, 'Not yet.' And finally he did stop. But then he put me into a furnace. And it got hotter and hotter and hotter, and I could hardly bear it. And I said, 'Stop, stop.' And he said, 'Not yet.' Oh, finally he did take me out. And then he gave me to a little lady who picked me up and started to paint me. But the fumes from the paint were awful. They made me sick to my stomach. And I said, 'Stop, stop.' And she said, 'Not yet.' Finally, she did finish, and she gave me back to the man with the furnace. It was awful. I thought I was going to be all burned up. It was so hot. I said, 'Stop, stop.' And he said, 'Not yet.' Well, finally, he did take me out. And then a lovely lady picked me up and put me on a shelf next to a mirror. Well, you can be the mirror. Can you see it there? It's quite lovely. Well, it quite took the little cups away, breath away. I'm not ugly anymore. I am beautiful and firm and clean." She couldn't believe what had happened. She was so happy, so filled with joy, that she cried. Have you felt spun around, punched, poked, burned, had your breath taken away? Have you felt like your dreams were going up in smoke? Jesus says, "Peace be with you. Do not fear. The Master Potter loves you and is watching over you and me. He is actively caring. And we must trust him with things that we cannot control or understand." And is there something in particular that you're struggling with? Well, Jesus says, "Tell me." What things? Lay it all out in prayer. I'm listening. And it's okay if we cry out, "Stop, stop, this hurts." I wonder what the Lord is doing. What is he creating in us? And when the ordeal is over, what will be revealed? Individually, corporately, let us trust the Lord who died in our place to show us the resurrection that only he can bring. First, becoming a mother. You can read about it. You can know all the facts, or feel as if you know all the facts, but when it actually happens, it's not really like that. You have to experience it. And then when the baby's born, what joy. The pain and the suffering just fades away. So I'm hoping it will be a bit like that. It certainly was for the disciples on the road to Emmaus. All that confusion disappeared at the revelation of their risen Lord. I wonder, have you as yet been surprised by Jesus when you were travelling a troubled road? Let's pray. Lord, please turn our eyes from our pain and confusion and impatience and fear. May this become a season of resurrection for us. We look to you for new beginnings, for hope and beauty. Open our eyes to a new season of your possibilities through Jesus Christ, our risen Lord. Amen. God bless.